It's still a case that the only Iron Ore robot to not yet have a replica in video game form is Iron Ore 4.
Alright. So, until recently, Iron All 4 has been the only Iron All that has been unaccounted for in any replica game. So, as Dom said that in the game, and I took that as a challenge. I wish I didn't. But, oh well. This is an example of me in the sunk cost fallacy, so uh, sit back and enjoy the time lapse. I'll interject with text. I mean, not text, but speaking for a bit when I feel key points are reached. But for now, just enjoy. As you can see, I'm making the body. I would later find out that I completely screwed this up and I didn't need the little ears on the front. Uh, there are many issues that would come to. Actually, I worked on this uh, while initially before a major update. So this spot kind of has like decals done in TinkerCAD that isn't really the thing to do anymore because it just adds more complexity. But harebrained me couldn't figure out how to get that to work, so I didn't retrofit that onto the spot while working on the final stages. But we'll get to that later there. So right now you see the body shape. I initially thought I only had one picture to work with as far as this robot goes. But it turns out there's actually footage. Well, not footage. Calling it footage would be um, enhancing the truth a bit. But there's a snippet of it fighting. Well, more so being pitted by Big Nipper, who promptly gets tossed on top of it by Chronic. And you'll see here I start work on the Iron All Smile. This goes away when I remember, oh hey, I have a program that I can literally make decals in. Why am I using shapes? So this gets deleted later, and you'll see me fiddle around with it, wasting a bunch of time. So if you want, you can just skip ahead to where I realize I've stopped wasting time and just go for the um, actual thing. Okay, so right about here, you're gonna see me realize, oh wait, I have a tool to make decals on my computer. Why don't I just use that? And I did that. And initially I set aside the other one for later in case it didn't work, but it ultimately worked out, so that never makes a comeback. And here you just see me trimming down the white 0.01 sheet so that the 2 feet grid of iron ore run through. You still have not seen me get rid of the ears yet. That's gonna be coming because I realized as part of that snippet I found earlier that this robot actually fought without those ears, and it looked like those ears were only on in the pit. For whatever reason, I don't know, it doesn't look like they are a safety device of any sort, but they were just there. Here you see little brief flashes of the image of the robot. I try to cut those down as much as possible because this was recorded directly from the web browser, and as a result, the robot, well, not the robot, but it captured literally any tab that was open. So I tried to cut down as much as possible on that. Now, here you see me trying to get rid of the little ears that actually, from watching fights, found out were only really on the robot in the pits. At least from what I can tell. This is highly conjecture and some bit of artist license. I only had 2 solid shots of the robot to work with. I also decided to base it heavily on Iron Ore 2.1 because after reading a bit about this robot, it turned out that this was, well, kinda a rework of it in a way. Basically had the same shape. Apparently the robot was getting a bit old and long in the tooth, and as a result, the team probably tried to get as much out they could of it. I don't know the full story, but that's my guess. The chassis was incredibly similar to that robot, and the only real difference being, like, instead of a full front flipper, there are cuts out in the chassis for a flipping arm. If what I suspect is true, I don't know why they didn't just call it Iron Ore 2.2. Because that would basically be what it was. They had already rebadged it at one point, that robot, as Iron Ore 2.1. So if this is the case, if this is indeed the case, and again, this is conjecture, it could very well be this is another flavor of Iron Ore 2. In any case, you see me go into adding the detailing the hinge. This is something I picked up on the pit photo, but didn't see, but I suspect it would be there because the flipper's gonna have to be attached to something, you know, in order for it to not fall off in battle or just from gravity. And I'm adding the flipper panel here. this one took some looking at pictures to see how the flipper panel looked. Well, picture. Let's be real here. So now the flipper panel comes together. Next up, after the flipper panel, you see me adding slopes so that I can actually get under things in Battle RC. And now I just look around to see what else needs to be added, and I realize, oh, I need to work on the axe supports now before I really start work on the axe, because you'll see it, this robot's axe is just in such an odd way, well, awkward shape to model in Tinker, and just for Battle RC in general. So I fiddled it with it for quite a bit before getting the supports correct. Well, correct-ish. This robot really was impossible to get accurate. And it kind of pains me as someone who takes, well, pride in the general accuracy and detail of their replicas. Like, I'll spend like days on a replica at a time. In fact, this whole time lapse you're seeing was recorded over the course of several days. Almost a month even. But now I start work on the axe here. And eventually I realized I forgot to put something in. Unfortunately, by that point, the robot had already been imported into the game. And those somethings were the little weight holes that were on the actual robot's axe. No biggie, really. I mean, the robot wasn't going to be accurate at all from the beginning, because I really didn't have much in the way of reference material like I do with my other replicas. Yeah, I work on some pretty obscure robots, but up until this point, I'd never really run into issues with sourcing reference material to actually make sure I get the replicas right. The irony of all this is, it happened on a robot from a well-known team. Because Team Ironall, they're not like one-and-done teams. They're like a big name in the UK. And it's just that this robot is pretty poorly documented. Although it makes sense, this one only had 3 fights as this robot. It was eventually sold off and renamed Orion, where it had a couple more fights, but lost every single one of them in both form. Well, all the fights where the win-losses were recorded. This is one of the robots where the actual record is unknown, because it fought at some live events which the records seem to have been lost. Both versions, like Orion and Ironall 4. So now you see me getting the axe's counterweight thing together. This was the most difficult part to actually work on. So now you see me moving it. trying to get it nice and center here, and just fiddling with the opening a bit. Eventually get it right. Eventually get the brackets right too. Now, you won't see it, but prior to export, I realized I'd made a few mistakes. One, I forgot to color in the eyes. They're supposed to have a white coloring in the background. And two, I forgot to separate the colors of the flipper's teeth. So, I didn't record fixing that. But there's a bit of a break between when I actually imported it into the game and when I finish the initial work. So now you see me like trying to create an illusion of like a peek into the internals, or well, the shadows, that would be the internals, because the bot already turned out to be 62 megabytes. I can't be bothered to do the internals, especially since this robot's so poorly documented. I don't know if they changed any internals around from 2. Since it has a new name, they could have. I'm not sure. Again, poorly documented robot, and there are no internal pictures of this machine. So, I really don't have anything to do on the internals. And again, as you see, I'm using the same wheel layout that 2 had, on the basis that there are no pictures of the underside of 4. But due to the way it looks and not everything I've seen of it, I can assume it was a flavor variant of Iron Awe 2. So I'm going off that regarding the wheels as well. Now you see me finishing up on this area. Right now the axe has been turned translucent, so I could actually do this, actually see what I'm doing. And right now I'm starting work on the side lettering. So this is one of the few things that was pretty well clear about this robot, is how the side lettering was. Even still, I had to find out what fonts were used, and even though I don't think it was right, the only thing it got right is, pretty sure the 4.0 was in Comic Sans. But I'm not exactly sure what font was used for the words Iron Awe and for the axe is back. Because when I tried to do Comic Sans for the words Iron Awe, it just did not look the same as it did in the picture. So I had to find a font, use what's that font to find out what the font used was, or a close variant. And here you see me adding the side screws. At this point, the robot's nearly done. I add like these little side ears that were on the picture. They weren't visible in the fight, but then you didn't get a really good side angle in that fight snippet either. So I have no clue if those were removed before or not. I'm just gonna assume they were there so that the robot wouldn't get stranded on its side. But as you'll see later, that would be the least of this replica's were issues. Good luck, Dom, trying to get 10 wins with this one. Also, for fun, Try not to use the pit this time. Thank you. Anyway. Back to the commentary. As you see, the nuts and bolts are pretty much done here. Now at this point, I'm just putting like the nuts and screws on the axe. Well, the axe is an area of the axe, and now working on them on the axe head. And here you see it. Change it to regular bolts. Change its side. And at this point, I start coloring and getting ready to import. So at this point, I just drag things out, and you see my process now is just color them and drag them down by one on the color slider, deselect, dehighlight it. And if I need to select multiple parts that are small, I just move a bunch of them and hit undo with the parts selected. And then just do my process. So now the robot is nearly done and was ready for initial import, or so I thought. But remember when I said earlier how the robot had issues with the flipper not being colored right and me forgetting to color in the eye? Well, I didn't record that part, but I did fix that off camera. And now we swap to putting it in game. So here we are in the Botlab. I start by trying to get everything together. For whatever reason, my Botlab's been having a really weird issue since this update, where it'll just select things willy-nilly that I'm not trying to select. So it's really annoying, and I don't know if this is a bug or not, but found the best way around it is to cope and try and select the pieces, well, find them in the list of pieces. Because due to my bot's level of detail, they generally tend to have a bunch of pieces. And as you can see, this is now almost done. Now I'm just coloring things in, making sure everything, like the right texture, has the right colliders, you name it. So I want this thing to be, well, as good as possible. But yeah. Now we move on to testing. I'm going to fast forward testing a bit, because there's some portions where I'm just trying to get the flipper right, get the axe right, and all of that boring stuff. So, yeah. But anyway, should show the robot off just about now. Anyway, so here I go to test the axe and immediately highlight a problem that I think Dom's gonna have some fun with. Of course, that is absolute sarcasm. But yeah, he gets stuck on its rear. Of course, now I'm trying to figure out if it will do this every single time it self-rights, but then I goof on driving while trying to free bulldozer, so that bulldozer can flip me. Eventually, I do free bulldozer. Try to get about flipped. And apparently if I write with the flipper, it has a tendency to do this. So I try this again, because if at first you don't succeed, well, yeah. Like, there's no reason it should be riding itself onto its back. It should have more than enough power to flip itself over. But doesn't. So I might fix that before I put it on the workshop. So, but yeah, it can self-right occasionally, but occasionally isn't just good enough. So now I test out the flipper. It's got some power. So yeah, that should self-right it, shouldn't it? But it doesn't.